So the reason that I wanted to interview you specifically is because you seem to have achieved an extremely deep level of understanding of what consciousness and reality and truth and being are, to such a degree, in fact, that it's hard to describe just how significant such an understanding can be. So how can we describe this to someone who's new to this, who hasn't really studied this much or hasn't even done much meditative or contemplative work? How do we describe just the significance of what this work entails?
That's a big question. So when you talk about this work, then I hear my work. And if I hear my work, this is more than enlightenment. So enlightenment as one aspect, a very central and important aspect of the work, is having a direct consciousness, becoming directly conscious of something ultimately true or absolutely true, like your true nature or what existence is. But the work is more than that. It's also grasping, using enlightenment as the kind of foundation or the base. It's grasping, what is mind? What is language? What is being a self? What is thinking? What is communication, etc. I mean, just all down the board. What is anything? Just put what is in front of it, and you got basically the foundation for the studies. Now, the thing that probably people won't grasp right away is that there's a possibility of actually you personally becoming directly conscious of these things. So it's not like finding an answer. It's not like a belief system. It's antithetical to a belief system. If you believe something, you're actually doing something that's getting in the way. So we're not ever inviting people to believe in something. We're inviting people to experience for themselves what's true. Now, when I say experience for themselves what's true, I can hear that, in different ways. People might think, all right, then I'll have my opinion about it, or I'll draw conclusions, or I'll figure it out. And the reason people will assume that is because that's pretty much what people do. That's pretty much what people think they can do in these kinds of matters, is just believe something, hear about something, or draw conclusions, or figure it out. But those are all functions of mind and hearsay, and they're quite minor to the work. So people aren't invited to figure something out. Sure, of course, we will do that. People will do that. They'll figure things out, they'll conclude, they'll believe, they'll have opinions. But all of that is pretty much nonsense compared to a direct experience. So we're always inviting people to grasp for themselves, beyond themselves too, not just, okay, I grasp it for myself like it's my own little, like I said, like opinion or something, or I have my own idea about it. But to grasp for themselves the truth. And that isn't something that's commonly shared as possible. We have to figure things out or learn from others. And it's great to learn from others, but that's only one aspect of things. That's a form of knowledge that we absorb from somebody else or from science or from, history. And it can teach us stuff. But to actually, for oneself, become directly conscious, and by directly, I mean you're there. So whatever's true about your nature, you're there. You're actually, it is that. You are that. You become conscious of that, the absolute nature of you, or the absolute nature of existence. You become conscious of it. You're one with it. See? That's what I mean by direct. So experience can be misleading because most of the time people find experience in perception, or, what we call experiences, emotions, things like that happening in the mind, or perceiving something. And this is not what enlightenment is.
What is enlightenment? Like, in a nutshell, if you had to just say it in a sentence or two to somebody who doesn't grasp the significance? Because enlightenment can seem just like, oh, it's like an emotional state that I have, or it's an idea, or just even a cool insight. But it's so much deeper than that. So how would you describe it in a nutshell?
Well, yes. Enlightenment is not a state. It's not an experience. It's not an emotion. It's not an insight. Those are all functions of mind. And enlightenment is not about mind. It's not about body either. But enlightenment is becoming conscious. And usually we don't have space for that. You know, we don't think that we can become conscious of what's true. So I guess the first thing is we'd have to consider that that what we perceive now is not what's absolutely true. And people usually don't even have that thought, because what we perceive now is everything. See, it's like everything. We think that is the world. That's everything. Because that's everything that they perceive. It's everything that goes on. So we think that, and then, you know, we move on from there. But like I say, that's a function of being an organism. That's a function of surviving in a world in which, you know, we create perceptions so that we can do that. But it's not what's absolutely true. And if you recall, you don't know how it is you began. Somehow you suddenly became, you existed. And you've worked really hard. But before that, you didn't exist. So in order to become a human, you had to invent being a human. You don't remember probably much about doing that, but you probably remember some of doing that. You know, as a kid, kind of inventing yourself, creating ways of thinking about yourself or others or reality, learning stuff. Yeah. And so that's basically where all of our consciousness is trapped. That's basically where all of our attention goes, is doing that job. But if we consider that somehow, say, we were ignorant from the beginning, and we are still ignorant, say, we don't know any more about what we are, or what existence is, or what life is, than we did in the beginning. All we've done is actually just learn about stuff. We've accomplished, you know, a great deal, but we've learned about stuff. But we haven't gotten a direct consciousness of what this is, what consciousness is, what self is, what existence is. So if we open up the possibility that we could do that, then that's enlightenment. So it's merely and only, it's not something fantastic, it's not grand, it's not, you know, huge, it's not mundane, it's none of that. It's off the charts. It has nothing to do with charts. It has nothing to do with scales. It has nothing to do, that's one of the problems, you see, with all the questions and the wondering and the trying to find an answer about enlightenment, is all of that is done in the same world. It's done in a relative world, and enlightenment is absolute. It's not about a relative thing. And so when we hear absolute, we think, whoa, that's really big because it's absolute, you know? No, it's just true. It just means absolutely true. Yeah, just the truth. And so, you know, enlightenment is you yourself becoming conscious of what's true, directly conscious of what's true, like what you are or what existence is. No more than that. And it's not hard. People think, oh, it's hard. No, not doing it is hard. Trying to do it might be hard, but doing it's easy. See, enlightenment is simply being where you already are. Boom, done. See, done.
For me, one of the ways that enlightenment came on my radar and it really triggered in me like, oh, this is something that's very important and very significant, is when I realized that what it meant is that I'm not my body, nor am I my mind. And just to get to that point where it even becomes a possibility that what you're talking about, the self, that the self could be a complete illusion, and that who I believe I am, my personality, my beliefs, everything that I hold like most dear about myself, just the fact that I'm a biological organism that was born and has grown up and is a human being and has DNA and all these things that I think of, like I'm physically made up of those things. But Enlightenment says that that's not the case. So what I wanted to ask you is, how do you view yourself? I mean, what are you? Are you a human being? Are you a creature? Are you a biological entity? Are you, what are you? And how do you view your life and also the possibility of your death?
As a self, I'm a human being. And will remain a human being till I die. But if you're asking me what I am, there's nothing there. And it's impossible to understand what that means, because the nothing that we think isn't the nothing I'm talking about. I mean, there really is nothing here. So it won't die. But, you know, your question had a lot, had a preamble, a long preamble here. When I was young, I always questioned stuff for some reason, whatever. I was always looking into things. I was working really hard to understand what this was all about. And so my first enlightenment was when I was 21 years old. And it didn't occur to me till more recently that I've lived my entire adult life with that as being not only a possibility, but a so. And so, you know, I realized that I might not be able to empathize with people who've lived their adult lives differently, the same way. Now, certainly I can as a human, because as a human, all human stuff is, you know, human stuff. It's the same condition, and it will remain the same condition. But once a friend of mine, I lived in a shack in Berkeley, behind a house, and a friend of mine brought a woman by, and I was in there contemplating, and he brought this woman by who was psychic, sensitive, you know, like that kind of thing. Interesting woman. And we were talking, and she said to me, you know, I see a man who is working really hard to get beyond himself. But I don't see, he's not allowing himself to be the one he's meant to be. And that struck me. I wondered what she meant by that. And yes, it was true. I was working really hard to get beyond myself, to transcend everything. And then a bit later, I realized that, you know, a couple of years later, I realized that I had not really lived life like people live life. I'd lived life questioning. I'd lived life training in disciplines and, you know, obsessively doing that kind of thing. But I didn't do the normal things people did. So if I was trying to give up life, maybe I should know what it is I'm trying to give up. See? What is it? You know, and so I decided to open a school, which, you know, start a business. I did these things I hadn't done before. And that was interesting. And then one of the things that struck me, and I'm getting to your thing, is I lived behind a school, very modest living, but I was making income. And I would, whenever I wanted toast, I would cook it over the flame on my stove there. I'd hold it and cook it on the flame there. And that's just, what I did, because that's all I could think to do. And at some point it struck me, I could buy a toaster. And see, the thing is now, most people know they can buy toasters, okay? And I knew intellectually I could buy a toaster. See, but the possibility of buying a toaster didn't exist for me. I lived in a world where, however I constructed it, that was a foreign matter, you see? And the moment I had this little eureka about I could buy a toaster, people actually sell them. They want me to buy toasters. There's somebody out there who wants me to buy their toaster. And I could go out and buy a toaster. And of course, then I realized I could buy all sorts of stuff, that it was all out there. I could buy a blender. And this was like a whole new revelation for me. So now, see, once that opened up, you see, then the world of appliances became available. Well, it's kind of like that with enlightenment, all right? So it's like once it becomes clear, see, once you get, hey, I could do this, see, then a whole world opens up that wasn't there before. And you could do other things too. I see people contemplating all the time, because this is my work, and they'll contemplate really hard and they'll dedicate themselves, but often they won't really have the possibility that they can do it. They have in the abstract the belief that it can be done, just like I had in the abstract the belief I could buy a toaster. If somebody had said, could you buy a toaster? I would have said, yes, of course I could buy a toaster. But it never occurred to me I could do that. See, that difference, that I could really do that. I could actually make it happen. For some strange reason. And so people contemplate, they often have, yeah, sure, it's possible, but not really for me. They don't get for me personally. I can do that. And so you have to create that possibility. You have to make it possible that you yourself can do it. And of course you yourself can do it. Who else could do it? Nobody can do it for you. And if it's possible, then it's possible for you because it is you. You're closer to you than anybody else. See? You're right there. See? You are part of existence. It's right here. It's not elsewhere. It's not something else. It is this. It's true now. So anyway, that possibility has to be created. You see, that one can do it, that actually in your very place, in the very place that you are now, it's possible for you to grasp what's actually true about you. Why not? It's easy. You just do it.
So you say that there's a whole world of possibilities once you have the first inkling of an insight that something new is possible. What is this world of possibilities? So let's say that I'm on board and I want to contemplate and I want to discover more truth. Like, where will all of that take me? If I take it to its ultimate conclusion and I contemplate everything I can contemplate, where does that take me?
I would have no idea. You may get nowhere, you may get everywhere, I couldn't tell you where it's going to take you, the contemplation. But if you do have your first direct experience or kensho or first glimpse, that kind of opens up a whole world. First of all, it goes from being just a belief or an idea to something that's like true. See? Yeah. But after you first grasp, say, your true nature, for example, what you actually are, It's not the end of the story, it's the beginning. There's much more consciousness to have than that. See? And there you can actually grasp. It's strange, because, well, you know, when you have your first one, that you'll see, it's strange that you don't know everything, you know. It's like you know what your nature is clearly, right? But that's it. You don't know what another is. You don't know what life is. You don't even know what self is, what mind is. You don't know what existence is necessarily, you know? I mean, I don't want to cramp your style. Maybe you'll know all those things all at once, but I haven't seen it. So you continue contemplating, you see, and now it changes. And it's like when you continue contemplating after you've had an enlightenment experience, it doesn't mean that, oh, now it's easy. I know where to go. I know where the shop is, you know, see? And I can go just get another one and another one. Sometimes that happens. Right? Sometimes you're in the groove and boom, pap, pap. You just, you know, you have a few because you're open, yeah, and you don't overthink it, see, and then just, but most of the time not. Most of the time, you know, you live in a glow for a while of that. You're separated from the, in a sense, you see, you're freed from the self-mind and stuff, you see. And then you just kind of hang, so to speak, for a while. But then the self-mind reconstructs and you start doing your job, you see, which is to survive and persist as a human. And your consciousness starts getting involved with that again. So when you contemplate another question, for example, you know, another matter like, what is another? You don't know any more than you did before. You know, perhaps it's possible to grasp, but you don't know. And so it's just as hard, so to speak. You're probably buoyed a lot by the fact that, you know, the possibility is now reality rather than just an idea. But that doesn't mean it, you know, it's any easier. And then you grasp what another is. Oh, bingo. Duh. And it's like, well, having gotten, you know, what you are, that should have been obvious, but no. I don't know why it works that way, but it does. It's like ignorance is a funny thing. It creeps in the most damnable places anyway. And so then, you know, you grasp what existence is. And it's like, and again, and life, et cetera. Saying you start becoming more and more deeply conscious. Because as you're grasping these things, as you're grasping these aspects of, or distinctions that we make in the relative world, they, of course, as if fall into the same soup of consciousness, you see? And that's why I said, duh, you know, because over time, you see, it turns out that everything's the same. It's like, I don't want to give away the story, but it turns out that, you know, you keep as if having the same experience, except on a deeper level. It's more and more inclusive, as if. You know, and once again, I use the word experience, and I'm sorry because some people confuse that as experience. But in any case, so it could take you there, you know, and hopefully would. And so you become just more profoundly clear and conscious of a lot more than you did in the beginning. And then you also see another aspect is because of this freedom, because it kicks so much ass, you know, on mind and thinking and, you know, the relative world. Where I mean relative world, I just mean like, you know, this and that, say, me and you. Relativity. That it opens up, you're given the space to question things in a very different way. You know, to look into what is this Why does it exist? Or what is that? What is the other thing? So even discovering, like I said, having insights about the nature of something, not absolute, but relative, like the creation of language or the invention of mind, say, or the body or movement or interaction or skills or principles or whatever, you see. And, it really empowers that because of the openness. You're allowed to look at it from a completely empty place. You see, you're not stuck in assumptions. So you're not stuck in having to look this way. You can look in any direction, so to speak, metaphorically speaking. See? And so that's another kind of benefit. Not that you can't look openly at things now, you see, or discover and have insights, even without an enlightenment experience. I'm just saying, it gives you a different perspective, so to speak, you see, and so another ability to even question more deeply than before.
What does this consciousness or this insight actually exist as? So if I discover who I am or what another is, that seems to be like a kind of insight or a kind of knowing, and yet also it seems to be different than that. And you've related it to like scientific knowledge or insights into where something come from or what something is on a more relative scale. So what is the actual substance of the insight? How does it exist?
Excuse me. The substance of the insight is the matter itself. See? You discover the matter itself. If we're talking about you, it is you. It is the substance of you. It is the existence of you. So it's not separate from that. Therefore, it's not an insight. It's not something. So this is the hard part, right? And it will continue to be the hard part. So it's like people think, okay, I will experience something. That means I'll have some experience that'll come to me. You see? Some perception that'll come to me, some insight that'll come to me, aha, or some such. It's not that. It is you. So it can't come to you, do you see? We keep thinking something's going to come to us, but it is you. That's all.
And how are direct insights different from scientific knowledge? Or similar?
Hugely different. They're completely different. Scientific knowledge is knowledge. It's knowledge. Consciousness is not knowledge. It's you. It's different. See, knowledge is something that comes to me again. You see? You become conscious of knowledge. You learn something, which is fine. But that's an experience. That's something that comes to you.
But as a society, scientific thinking has just become so pervasive, and rationalist thinking has become so pervasive that if something doesn't even fall into the scientific paradigm, it's not taken seriously. It's not possible to even discuss it seriously in some circles. What are your thoughts on that?
Sure. Maybe not as pervasive as you think. But out of the Dark Ages, at some point, we call the Enlightenment, right? The Renaissance, which is not what I'm speaking about when I speak about enlightenment, came science. And it was a struggle for science to exist because science seemed to be antithetical to religion, and religion was the dominant form of knowledge at that time, or beliefs. And so as science took off, there was this contrast between religion and science, and so in order for science to exist in the beginning, it had to basically say, well, we're not handling that matter. See, we're not handling what's ultimately true. You guys are. See, so that, they didn't burn them in a stake or something. In any case, science unwittingly, without thinking about it, I think came to a conclusion that direct consciousness wasn't possible. Only indirect knowledge through experimentation and validation and stuff like that was possible. Now that's science's job, and if it's doing its job, which, the scientists who do their job do it with dispassion and openness and try to discover as best they can what's true indirectly through experimentation and whatnot. But there doesn't mean, that was a false conclusion. It doesn't mean that direct consciousness is not possible. So even in a scientific community, you could open up the possibility of direct consciousness. You just wouldn't know how to do experiments.
And by direct consciousness, you literally mean that if I'm sitting here and I'm looking at a cup, that to grasp what the cup is, really, because it's within awareness, within my awareness, that I am literally becoming the cup, in a sense. But my sense of self now has to change, because usually it doesn't include being a cup, or it even being possible to become a cup.
Yes. But now, let me clarify. You wouldn't become a cup, okay? Now I am a cup, now I'm a teapot, right? You would grasp what's true. So you'd be as if one with the cup, whatever cup is, which may not be a cup. There may be no cup there. But you would grasp what's really true about that. And yeah, that would be different.
It's so difficult to even consider that possibility seriously for the average person, for the average mind, because it seems almost fantastical or philosophical.
Don't think of it that way. Just don't think of it that way, okay? See, because when you think of it that way, you're thinking fantastical. So you're thinking, well, I have to somehow reach outside my body and become the cup. No, you just have to grasp what it is, that's all. See, it's not like sci-fi, all right? So you do have to have the possibility that you can do that. But in any case, that you have an experience of the cup, and that's new, isn't it? So it's not so far-fetched to grasp what is this experience of a cup. Yeah? You see what I'm saying? See, that's not leaving your body and doing some weird, esoteric thing. That's grasping what that is.
But it feels like I already know what that is. I already know what a cup is.
Okay, then you can't grasp what a cup is. Because if you know what a cup is, then there's no question possible, is there? So you would have to grasp you don't really know what a cup is. What the cup is. See? What the cup is. Maybe, but then you have to get that yourself. See? And you'd have to do it directly. You have to grasp what the cup is, what an object is.
And how is directly different from just experiencing it?
Experience is never direct.
So a direct experience is something that most people have never had in their life before.
As far as I know. Yeah, I would imagine that's true.
That seems to be the key there, is because when we first hear about the possibilities of consciousness work, our mind interprets it as thinking like, oh, well, yeah, I kind of know that. Yeah, I kind of know what a cup maybe is, or maybe I don't really know what it is, but if I looked at it long enough, I would know. Or it just seems like the gap is not seen. I guess is what I'm saying. The gap is not seen between just regular experience that I have and actual truth.
Yeah, that's where not knowing comes in. So you have to allow yourself not to know, and we're dedicated to knowing. We spend our whole lives trying to accumulate knowledge and to know what everything is. And people don't grasp that not knowing is the basis for any kind of questioning, any kind of investigation. You have to genuinely not know. And so if it's a direct experience you're shooting for, or direct consciousness, you have to directly not know. Okay? You have to really, really not know. See? I mean, you have to really not know to your quick, which you already do. People don't want to admit that usually. See, we spend a lifetime avoiding it. See? But getting it, you're really deeply, deeply ignorant. Okay? It's like you really, not as a put down. I'm just saying that people really got to get they don't know. Or another way to look at it is what you don't know is what you don't know. Okay? And once you get that you don't know something, then questioning is appropriate. Wondering is appropriate.
What is the deepest, most profound insight you've had in all your consciousness work? Because you've done so much contemplating of many different things and yourself and life and people and all of this. Personally for you, what was your deepest insight and how did it, I want to know how it felt to you from a first person perspective, like when you had it.
They were all the deepest. Yeah, it's like, really, they're all the deepest. I know that doesn't sound, well, it's difficult to split up like that. How did it feel? Well, like nothing at all. After the first Enlightenment, like I told you, I had spent pretty much 24 hours doing nothing but contemplating for days. And the goal was to get what I am. And I did. Now, you would think that having gotten that, I would want to rush out and tell somebody. Either that or I'd want to keep it a secret or something for some strange reason, I don't know. See? But the person that I came up with, who was he was staff at this intensive that we were doing. We drove up from the Bay Area into the mountains. And the person I came up with, I drove down with, he was my ride. That's why I was hanging out after the intensive, which is when I had the Enlightenment experience, right? And the entire ride home, it never occurred to me to mention to him that I got what I was. It never came up. That's how mind-boggling this stuff is, which is to say, I did not withhold it. It just never occurred to me. There was no self for it to occur to. Okay? There was no mind operating the normal way where I go, hey, I should share this. It'd probably be of interest. Anyway, see, it's difficult to explain. But it's always positive. Even after, see, the effect it has on the mind, the effect it has, on the person is always positive. It's always freeing. That's always the case.
What was the effect on you in your practical life?
Well, it changed how I related to everything. It changed how I related to me, for sure. I mean, it changed my life in a very fundamental way. It didn't change having to piss. Okay, it didn't change, how I make an omelet. All right. See, all of that is still, being human and doing the self stuff. See, so if you're wondering if it changed any of that, no, but like I said, it had that opening power. So I started to, in the things that I did at the time, they started to just unfold at a very rapid rate. And had more enlightenments pretty quickly after that too. And things just, boom, 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 started to unfold. And I pretty also quickly changed my career path. I was going to be a doctor. That's what I was studying at the time. And then it became obvious to me that that wasn't what I was going to be doing, that I would be doing consciousness work.
Sometimes people ask me, that's funny because sometimes people ask me when I talk about enlightenment to them, they get scared. And I had this fear myself when I started learning about it and started doing heavy contemplation, is that, well, what if I have to change, what does this mean? I have to end my career? Does this mean that I have to leave my marriage? Does this mean that I have to move out of this city? Or, it's just like your mind starts to go to this place of wondering about the negative consequences that this could have to having to change one's life.
Yeah, no, this is not true. You don't have to change your life. You want to change your life. That's very different. And see, if you want to do it, it's not something you have to do, is it? See, it's very different. And you don't have to change a thing. You could be an enlightened doctor, you could be a piano player. You could do whatever you want. Anything that you could do before, you can do after. You should probably do it better. And probably you can relate to it differently. Say, yeah, but you can do anything. Any human can do. It's just, see, it's a matter of like basically now what it is you want to do with your life. And also, people have this image of celibate monks and stuff like that, cloistered in monasteries and whatnot. And so if I get enlightened, I'll have to go join them or something. No, they're there to get enlightened. Okay, they're not there being enlightened. Okay, hopefully they are in some cases and stuff like that. And they're working their way through it. See, but that's something done to become enlightened. See, so people have this image of I'll have to go up to a mountain or something. I have to live in a cave. See, no, they got the cart before the horse there. Go live in a cave now. Or don't.
Why is it that seeing enlightenment or seeing the truth has a transformational effect on a human being? It seems like people who have these direct experiences then have a transformation in their life. Like you said, maybe not something practical like how they cook an omelet, but they do have a transformation. What is the actual mechanism that truth has on transforming the human psyche?
Yeah, it's quite simple. First of all, there's two sides to this that I would address. One, don't expect transformation. Say, in other words, don't people expect, okay, I'm not going to be human anymore. I'm not going to be myself anymore. I'm not going to have all these mind things anymore, all these character traits. Not true. You will have exactly what you have now. You see? And so if you work for enlightenment so that you can free yourself from that, yes on the one hand, no on the other. Because as a human, what you've crafted will remain. You will still be a human. You will still walk and talk and think and emote. See, but the transformational aspect is that at some point, you won't be that anymore. See? So now how you relate to that now is different. And so changing it becomes much more possible. Because if you're not it, you can change it. You still have to change it. And now also, as far as I can tell, just in my own experience and in the experience of people I've watched, some things fall away right away. You know? Why? I have no idea. Okay, that's not true. I do have ideas, but I really don't know. And you know, you become conscious, directly conscious, you know, of something, and then some things are just gone. Some reactions, emotions, you know, ways of thinking of yourself or whatever, just gone. They just go. Others don't. See, and then perhaps you become more deeply conscious and some other things go. But primarily, the whole function of being human will remain. And that's something you have to change deliberately, you know, should you want to do that. See? Look at any enlightened person or legend of enlightened persons, you see, and kind of look and study them. There's always a character there, isn't there? See? There's a person there, and they're different one from another. So they don't all like, they get enlightened and they become this one kind of thing, you know, like that, right? No, there's a character because there was a character there before they became enlightened, you see? And so they are now acting through that character. They will remain acting through that character or change the character. That also happens, you know. So you can become a different character, but you do that purposely, you know. See? So the Enlightenment, what it does is give you the consciousness or understanding, if you will, that you aren't any of it. See? You aren't the character. You never were the character. See? You aren't the thinking, the emoting, the reacting. You're not any of it. Yeah.
So then what is the motivation for self-improvement or for transformation or for change after a deep enlightenment that I'm nothing? Why would then I waste my time and energy to improve myself? Because I don't have deficiencies.
Right, you may not. But your character might. See? You might recognize your character has maybe dysfunctional ways of thinking or behaving or emoting and say, okay, that's not useful anymore, and stop it. You know, toss it out. See? Or maybe you want to create a character that's more useful for your piano playing or something. See? Or, you know, what you're trying to do as a human.
Tell me about some cool things you've been able to accomplish with having more consciousness and having had these enlightenment experiences. For example, you were able to win the world championship in contact martial arts in the 70s, I believe. And of course, that's something you've trained for a lot, but I also heard you say how consciousness played into you being successful in that. Or for example, you gave examples and talked about how you're able to go to the dentist and not use painkillers to get your teeth drilled. So like, it seems like that is only possible through increases in consciousness.
Well, neither of those examples are only possible through increase of consciousness. You know, people do, you know, win tournaments and people could probably do this Novocaine thing. But they would have to understand what pain really is. And pretty much nobody does. So, like I said, it's the same thing I said before. The consciousness allows you to look into things differently. And so as far as the, you know, the world tournament thing, I was a martial artist. You said I was training. I was really into it, kind of obsessed with it before I got enlightened. And so I continued afterwards, and it just turned around for me. Right? Instead of, I was dedicated to just that, I was dedicated to using it as a vehicle. for growth and understanding and mastery, so that, what I could learn out of that. And so because I had insights before I had enlightenment, I realized principles and things like that before I had enlightenment. So those are available. That's not an exclusive domain. And after that consciousness, like I said, understanding the interaction between two human beings became much more profoundly grasped. What we were doing and how it happens in perception and body and how the body worked. And I studied that. I kept working on these things. Like I said, you don't know everything. And I worked on, what is the most effective way to use the body? What's the most effortless way to use the body, etc. What are the most effective principles for interaction in that domain? And discovered a lot, as far as I can tell, more than anybody else ever has in the history of humans, as far as I can tell. And I've studied everything, in that world that I know of. And so winning the world tournament wasn't very difficult, because, the people that I was fighting didn't understand these things. And you could tell, I could tell that they did not know what was going on. Right? It was a mystery to them. Somehow they were losing and they didn't know why. I could tell by looking at them, saying it wasn't fitting the normal world that they were used to, and stuff. So that was useful. Like I said, I wanted to do that so people would listen to me more.
Yeah, one of the things that strikes me about raising consciousness and getting deeper understanding and grasping the truth for what it really is that it does have consequences in the real world. It's not just a philosophical enterprise, which a lot of times I talk about enlightenment, or I talk about some concept or some way to change oneself or to discover the truth and to see something. But then someone hears me talk about that and they say, well, yeah, but how does this really apply to my life? Is it really going to help me? Is it really going to change anything? But what I've discovered is that in a paradoxical sense, like you said, it changes nothing, but also it changes everything. It has practical consequences.
Yes. Yeah. Not that it takes you off the hook, though. Say. Well, it's like you think, okay, if I get enlightened, it'll do everything for me. It'll change my life. It'll, etc. No, it won't. See? Because actually, there's no attainment. There's no achieving of something. See? It doesn't provide you with anything that you don't already have, so to speak. See? It just is a consciousness of what's already true. So you may be ignorant of that, and now you're not. But it didn't change anything because it was already true even when you were ignorant, right? See, it's already true now of you. It's already true now of existence. It's already true now.
But my knowing it could make me more effective in what I'm doing.
Yes.
So even if I am a doctor or a pianist or a cook or whatever, I can do it better. I can do it with less resistance or whatever difficulties I have in progressing there.
Probably, yes.
Because emotions come into play into everything that we do, and our relationship to emotion changes so much from having a grasping the truth.
Even your ability to question what an emotion is. And like I said, you were talking about the cup. Say, what is a cup? Well, people have emotions all the time, and they think they know what it is, only because they recognize it, just like you recognize the cup. See? So you have something arise in your experience that's like fear or anger or love, and you say, I know what it is because I recognize it. Ah, that's love. That experience is what we call love. Ah, that's that experience. Ah, and that's anger, that's fear. Okay, but what is it? What is fear? Why is it there? How does it come to pass? What is its existence, you see? And people don't know that. But you can. One can. I do. See? And you, by questioning it, though, see, somebody who has a few enlightenment experiences doesn't necessarily know what fear is. They may be able to detach themselves from fear, but they don't necessarily know what fear is. You have to investigate it, see, and say, what is this? What is anger? What is love? See, what is it? See? And then you understand, you start to grasp it. Fear is an activity that's occurring, it's being created by you, and for what purpose it's being created by you, and how it's being created, for example. And, having this consciousness provides, perhaps I could say, the space to do that more powerfully than before. Of course, you have that possibility now. So you could question fear now. Okay. But after enlightenment, it occurs for you to do so. Before, usually not. See, we're just too busy being run by it rather than, looking into what we're run by. So that's a consequence.
What's the relationship between truth realization and enlightenment, let's say, and the connection of that with morality or ethics? Because one thing that seems to me is that by grasping the nature of self or reality, that reality is revealed to be morally neutral. And yet at the same time, it seems like enlightened people behave in an extra moral and ethical sort of way. What's the connection there?
Well, enlightenment doesn't have anything to do with morality. Morality is an invention. It's a human invention, a cultural human invention for a purpose, to serve a purpose. And once again, useful to look into what that is. See? And is it serving the purpose or is it not? I think why enlightened people perhaps seem to act more morally is it's ridiculous to operate out of falsehoods. It becomes more clear, or really clear, how ridiculous lying is, okay? How ridiculous and dysfunctional trying to deceive, trying to lie, trying to get things for yourself, just, selfishly and that kind of thing. It's irrelevant and dysfunctional. It doesn't serve anything. Okay? And if you're conscious that you are the truth, so to speak, okay, then it's degrading to do that other stuff. Okay? So one would, I imagine, work hard to be consistent with whatever's true on whatever level, even relatively, see? Like facts and whatnot. So it's like, I wouldn't want to tell you something that's not true. And that can be a challenge because when I speak, it's going to be understood in various ways. See? And I know that. But still, I'll try to, speak as honestly as I can. And that might seem like a moral issue. I don't think of it as a moral issue. I think of it as my job, really. And yeah, and perhaps also the, kind of the freedom from self that the consciousness provides is you're not motivated by the same things as much as other people, I mean, to the degree one's still identified with the self and stuff like that, then perhaps, but not the same way, you see? And so it seems like, wow, they're more moral, whereas really they're just more free and just acting out being a human. and not having to act out, kind of selfish motives and lying and deceit and stuff like that seem more immoral, or doing bad acts, that seem immoral and that are really just stupid.
But as far as reality is concerned, anything goes. There are no rules, there are no stipulations, is what Enlightenment reveals.
Enlightenment reveals what Enlightenment reveals. That's the consciousness itself. See? And so, yes, life is meaningless. See? But that's not, in the world of meaning, that's a negative. And it's not a negative. See? And yes, all sorts of things are invented and created, see? Which seems like, okay, we just make them up. But no, that's the way it's always been. And, reality, it really depends on what we're talking about. Seems like there's rules to me, if you're talking about the world that we share. But if you're talking about the real nature of reality, or the real nature of existence, there's nothing there or here.
Talk to me about the difference between absolute truth and relative truth. This is something that you emphasize quite a bit, is that what the average person considers truth or knowledge, including scientific knowledge, is all in the domain of relative truths. Even the most indubitable things like laws of gravitation or mathematical truths, or the things that we would normally consider as absolute truths. You're saying these are not absolute truths. Then what is an absolute truth relative to that?
No, all of that's relative. It's very, very simple. It's relative because it's relationship. Gravity is relationship. It's relative because it's not absolute. In other words, it's not infinite. It's not everything, so to speak. It's not absolute. It's this and that, one thing or another. See, a fact, a chair, a you, a me. See, that's all relative. Relationship, one thing and another. See? And everything in the relative world, everything is relative. Everything is relative. There's nothing that's not relative, which is to say only nothing is not relative. Only now, only infinity, only nothing can be absolute, because they're the same thing. See? It's what's absolutely so. What the real nature of existence is. See, so there's no comparison. There's no this or that. There's no elsewhere. There's no other way to explain that.
Is truth the same as existence?
Well, sure, if you're saying truth is the same as existence, right? So existence is whatever it is. So it's whatever's true. So but it really depends on what you think when you say that. Truth is the same as existence.
Even if all of reality is consciousness, if everything I'm experiencing is consciousness, which is what Enlightenment seems to suggest, then there still seems to be the question remaining of, does a particular object have consciousness or sentience? For example, a rock, a tree, a bird, we assume an animal or human probably does, or a rock or a chair doesn't. What insights does Enlightenment give us about this?
It doesn't give you any insights about that unless you become enlightened what a rock is, and or what consciousness is. In other words, you grasp directly what this stuff is.
And then I can know what has sentience and what doesn't?
You already know what has sentience and what doesn't. Sentience is a distinction, and you make it, right? See, you make a distinction between sentience. You just did. See, you said rock is not sentient and bird is. or a human is.
I mean, I don't really know. Maybe a rock is sentient, so I'm open to that possibility.
But in your distinction, you see, which is your experience, see, in your experience, you've already made that distinction. You already know that's what sentient is. Now, you may not know what that is directly, see, but you know you've already made the experience, the distinction between a rock and sentience. Now, here's something. Maybe, I invite you to consider that maybe there's no difference between sentience and a rock. Maybe there's no difference between, a rock and consciousness. See, the difference between a rock and sentience is relative. Ta-da!
But we assume that humans have sentience, and we assume that rocks don't.
We assume all sorts of things.
But is it possible that science one day proves that a rock does have sentience?
I have no idea if science is going to prove rock does have sentience. I'm saying we don't know what sentience is. We don't know what a rock is. Okay? See, and you're asking, is a rock sentient or not rock sentient, et cetera, like that. Yeah? So find out what a rock is.
So are you saying that it's with direct consciousness I can figure out what the answer is, or that it's just open to scientific investigation in the future?
Well, both. I mean, it's always open to any investigation, in the future. You have no idea what science is going to come up with in the future, right? It's wide open. That's all relative, though.
One thing that strikes me about your work is it doesn't really focus on what I might call the universal love aspect of enlightenment. A lot of other teachers stress the love component of enlightenment. They even have the question of what is love? But your work and your workshops and your books, as far as I can tell, don't really use that word or stress that concept very much at all. I'm just curious why that is.
Love is a relative experience. And for most people, love is an emotion. It's also an enticement. People use love as an enticement, just like peace, harmony, love, etc. It sounds really good. So come join my community. It's about these things. You'll get these things, and everybody wants those things. So it's easy to join, but I don't want to mislead people. Right? So I don't put out enticements. And I also try not to, as best I can now, I say a lot of things I didn't say before, because I don't want to plant in people's minds, in the work, stuff is just going to get in the way. See? Like answers. So I avoid that. I try not to plant things, you see. I try not to tell people, oh, this is that, and this is the other thing. Except now I tell them it's nothing, but I figure that's not going to do them any good anyway. See, because it won't mean anything. Yeah. But love is a side effect. And the love that occurs from enlightenment isn't an emotion, and it's not a personal thing. It's as if a connection with everyone. See, now that sounds a little airy-fairy. But it's like I think it comes out more like a desire to help people because you are people or some such thing. I'm not saying this very well. But like the compassion, you see? The compassion to me shows up by how I can serve people, how I can serve them, how I can assist them, how I can facilitate them in getting it themselves, see? In grasping stuff for themselves and grasping this thing for themselves. See? That to me is compassion, you know? Entertaining them with ideas of love isn't. But, you know, doesn't mean that love is in any way bad.
Give me an idea of how much work you did to achieve the profound depths of consciousness that you have. Just, I want practically to get a sense of, like, what did you actually do? Like, from the point where you started to get into enlightenment work, and then you had all these realizations, like, what did you do? Like, you sat down every day and you contemplated how many hours, how many days, how many years?
Pretty much my whole life. Pretty much 24/7. The amount of work that I've done, and there's no requisite, you know? It's like you don't have to like earn your chops by putting in so many hours and so many, you know, none of that is true. You can become conscious right now. People don't tend to become conscious right now, but you can. And, you know, some people will contemplate for decades and decades. And maybe not, you know, grasp very, very deeply. And some people will contemplate for a little while and grasp quite deeply, you know? In my case, there was just investigation going on all the time. Sometimes, you know, I think about it, and sometimes, you know, when I watch people working, you know, working so hard, I have an empathetic reaction in the sense of how hard it must be for them to grasp some of these things that I'm sharing or trying to facilitate them in grasping, you know, because of the staggering amount of work I did. That's inhuman. And of course, you know, I didn't know that particularly at the time because that's all I was doing, say. But when I look back at it, or over time, when I've been paying more and more attention to other people, you know, and what they do and how they do it, what I did was unusual, you know, and but you know, it doesn't have to be that way. Ramana Maharshi, we hear, you know, he had a very, very, very deep enlightenment in a matter of minutes, as far as I can tell. You know, just, you know, like pretending he was dead on the floor, trying to find out, you know, what's beyond death and all that kind of stuff, you know, when he was very young. He's still a teenager. Right? So
what do you think it was in you that drove you to have this kind of obsessive, maybe curiosity or fascination or something like that about truth or existence? Because you seem to be really passionate about truth. What about you? Because most people aren't that way. It's hard for people to relate to that.
Yeah, I'm discovering that. It's just always obvious to me. That was always important to me. That was the thing to do. When I have no idea. After I had first few enlightenments, and then buckled down and started to really work. I thought, that came too easily. That came too easily. It's like, why? So, and then I had the thought, well, maybe I'm just catching up to where I was before, kind of like lifetime kind of deal, right? Maybe I just caught up, and now the real work begins. Anyway, that's a thought. Just a thought.
Do you think some people are just genetically or biologically predisposed to have a personality type, for example, that values truth more or is more spiritually minded or more spiritually accomplished or adept? For example, there are people who are more muscular biologically, and there are people who are maybe better mathematicians because of the way their mind works.
I don't think so. Because you are who you are. You are what you are, And like I said, all those other things are relative, even genetics. Now, it might be that some people in their particular character or maybe their upbringing or interests or whatever are more predisposed to discipline or to investigate things, whatever. I don't know, But I don't think anybody is... But I don't know. Yeah.
What reforms do you think are necessary on a social level and on a societal level, on a political level, to make enlightenment more widespread? Because it's such a rare thing. It's so rare to find enlightened people or enlightened teachings even in the culture at all.
Honesty and openness. If we had cultural values, if widespread we had cultural values of real honesty, right, and real questioning, openness, I think that would be useful.
What's going on during deep sleep? So I don't mean when I'm dreaming. Obviously, I'm having some kind of sensations. But when I'm like totally out of it, there seems to be no consciousness there, no awareness there. It seems like it's as though I never existed. So what is that? Is that an illusory state that I don't exist, or is that my true nature? Is that what I am when I get enlightened? It seems like there's something fishy going on there.
All right. Obviously, it's not what you are when you get enlightened, because when you're in deep sleep, you're ignorant, right? It's like you have no idea what's going on, right? But deep sleep's deep sleep. You go. Hallelujah.
But it seems like nothingness.
That's right.
Is that what you mean by nothingness when
No.
you say your nature is nothingness?
No, that's not what I mean by nothingness. That's what I mean by deep sleep. What I'm saying is you go, you stop. Your mind stops, your self stops. And like I said, hallelujah, you need that. Everybody needs that, right? So even just biologically. Interesting though, isn't it? It's an interesting thought that you have to go away in order for your body to survive. See, but really, it's just your mind shuts down. So that's awareness. That's awareness. That's cognition. So that stops, and you're left with nothing. Ramana Maharshi said, you're closer to who you are when you're in deep sleep.
So that deep sleep state is probably the closest experience I have to my true nature, if I'm not enlightened yet.
I wouldn't say that because, the deep sleep, like I said, you're completely ignorant, so it doesn't really help. Not knowing is the closest you can get to your true nature. Genuine, deep, not knowing. How's that?
One thing that always was on my mind, I'm very philosophically minded, so I like to do thought experiments, but as soon as I learned about enlightenment, here's the problem I had, is that, so when we're in a dream state, when we're sleeping, we don't really recognize sometimes that we're in a dream state. So we're like really in it. And then we wake up and realize, oh, it was just a dream. Now, then we can learn about enlightenment. We can maybe have an enlightenment experience or two. And then it's like analogous to that. It's like we had the waking state, and then, oh, I can be really awake. I can be spiritually awake. And then it seems like that's kind of like where it stops. But then, my philosophical mind continues, kind of extrapolates on that and says, well, what if even the things that we're calling absolute truth, the infinity, the nothingness that I grasp through direct experience, and I do a lot of work like you've done, but is there still not a possibility that all of that is still within some paradigm, and that there's an even higher or a deeper paradigm that hasn't yet been accessed, or may be impossible to access just given the limits of the mind and the fact that we are human beings and so forth?
No.
How can you be so certain about that?
Because it's not possible. It's not possible. Everything you described is relative.
But
You can't get more absolute than absolute. Okay?
But isn't that being judged from the lower paradigm in the same way that if I, let's say, wasn't enlightened, I would say, well, it's not possible to be enlightened because, look, this is all that's possible.
No.
Because our notions of possibility, what informs that?
What?
Of what's possible and not possible. Isn't that assumptions we have? Possibility
is wide open. It's infinite, right? But infinity is no more than infinity. You know what I'm saying? Infinite doesn't exist. It's not lots and lots. See? So you can't get more infinite than infinite. So you can't get more absolute than absolute.
Unless for some reason we're wrong about that and we don't realize it.
Alrighty.
But that's not a possibility.
Not really, no. In the relative domain, there's infinite possibilities, and there always will be, and it'll never stop. You can learn forever. You can create more distinctions forever. Why? That's the nature of consciousness.
And everything is consciousness.
Okie dokie. Everything is exactly what it is.
And we can use whatever word we want to describe it.
Well, I would avoid raspberry. You see, but it's just getting silly now, so.
Tell me about distinctions, because one thing you talk about in your work is there seems to be a special significance to distinctions, because the distinction, you don't even classify it as a thought. And it's hard for me to wrap my mind around what a distinction even is.
Okay. Well, good. That brings me to see. Yeah, a thought is a distinction. A distinction is everything. Everything is a distinction. See, and that in my new book, The Genius of Being, which is the end of a trilogy, starting with the Book of Not Knowing, which lays the foundation, and Pursuing Consciousness, which moves on, and then The Genius of Being, which hasn't come out yet, but look for it in 2017. In The Genius of Being, I do a whole thing on distinction. So that'll probably clear it all up for you. Yeah. But distinction is everything. It's everything you perceive and everything that is in the relative domain. The absolute is not a distinction. We make a distinction between absolute and relative. That's a distinction. But then what we think of absolute, or how we hold absolute and how we hold relative, that's a distinction. That's not absolute.
It's very mind-boggling. And if people want to go deeper in this work and they want to learn more from you, what are some next steps for them?
Well, if they want to learn more from me, as long as I'm still teaching, I do week-long workshops, intensives, things like that here at the center. And they're certainly invited to come here. If they look on peterralston.com, since my name is Peter Ralston.com, that'll take them to a website that has information, about the work. If they want a phone-friendly website, that's now available. We just created it. It's called personalempowerment.me. And that works better on the phones because the website doesn't work. Well, it's an old website, so it doesn't work very well on the phones. There's e-courses that we do. There's other books. They could always contemplate. We have e-courses on contemplation, etc. So yeah, I just find out more information and join in.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.